Wormhole crew and the Space City Pinball League. And I also currently work for Barrels of Fun.
My name is Clint. I've always liked pinball as a kid, and then in 2019 I bought my first game, and we ended up meeting all the people in Houston, including people from the Wormhole, like Tim Hood, who has an amazing collection. And then back in 2021, when the Banning auction came up, he bought several games, one of which was Magic Girl. And then shortly after that, a kit was offered by a team that worked on it in the Netherlands. And Tim bought one of those kits, and we offered to install it for him. So that's what we've been working on for the last couple of weeks.
Yes, so we took some time over the New Year's break to take apart what was his Magic Girl and install this kit. The kit's pretty interesting because it comes in a giant box, and it's like getting 100 mods for your pinball machine all at once. Eric Bartels in the Netherlands was the technician he has a video sequence with 38 different videos where he guides you through the entire installation process. And the kit includes new parts from all over the machine. So it's got a new computer, new power supplies, all new mechanisms, a whole new set of plastics, new custom printed circuit boards, new opto electronics, new LEDs. So there's just an almost unfathomable amount of new equipment in this kit that the Dutch team provided. So it takes a while to install it, but they give you so many clear instructions, and every time we had a question, Eric responded almost instantly to whatever questions we might have had. So overall, the installation was really straightforward for us. Magic Girl is really a fascinating pinball machine. It all started in 2011. It was John Popadiuk was trying to start up a new pinball venture, and it was supposed to be a super low run, like 20 machines, and very expensive. They were going to be $16,000 each, which in today's dollars is like $22,000 in 2024. So it was supposed to be very exclusive, and the idea was that he would hand build each one for these customers. This was all under the Zidware company banner. At the same time, he was trying to create some buzz around a Zombie Adventureland game. Back then it was Ben Hecht's Zombie Adventureland. If you recall the Deep Root Saga, that was all wrapped up into those adventures as well. And Alice in Wonderland, which is rumored to be coming out of Dutch Pinball, at least as a contract manufacturer, very soon. So there's lots of interesting history associated with that. It's also has rolled up in the birth of American pinball. So when John needed help finally manufacturing the games and kind of getting through the build, it was Aimtron and American Pinball that was born to actually do the contract manufacturing and deliver these machines to their customers. And of course, now American Pinball has made a number of machines and is off being American Pinball. So that's a really fascinating part of the story as well. Ultimately, Zidware folded, and American Pinball and John separated ways after he was contracted to make Houdini for them. I think ultimately Joe Balser finished up Houdini for American Pinball. So that's another really interesting thing about the good that came out of Magic Girl was David Van Ness, who is the CEO of Barrels of Fun and the creators of the Labyrinth pinball machine. David actually reached out to John and when these things were occurring and said, do you need any help on animations? And so David worked with John on those animations, and Jeremy Packer, who's also known as Zombie Yeti, did the art for the playfield on the machine. And of course now he's probably one of the very most famous pinball artists working. So
yeah, Eric tells that story, but it's pretty funny. They were looking for artists, and somehow or another he was doing a Google search with zombie and art in there, and Zombie Yeti came up just based on the name. He had never done pinball before, and so that's how Zombie Yeti ended up getting into pinball, was all through Magic Girl. So one of the good things that came out of Zidware for sure. So the game that Tim purchased is number 16. So I assume that it was purchased directly from the Pinball Museum. What's it called?
Yeah, it was from the Banning
Pinball Museum in California.
Yeah, the Pinball Museum.
And so, whenever they went up for auction, he purchased that. And talking to the guys in the Netherlands, one of the things that was difficult for them to make this kit was apparently almost all these games are different. So, the design wasn't 100% vetted whenever they were going to build it. So I think some stuff was being changed on the fly. A common problem with a lot of the games was some of the diodes on the printed circuit boards were put backwards, or switches were put backwards. It's just lots of little issues that were not consistent across. So one of the biggest struggles that we worked with this machine specifically was we kept having problems with the LED lights on there. So we would put a new software on the little Arduino board that controls the LEDs. It would work fine, but then we would reboot the machine, and every time it would completely stop working. And so we spent more time trying to troubleshoot that more than anything. And ultimately what the problem was the start button was wired so that it's normally closed instead of normally open. So whenever you start the machine, it was like someone was holding the start button. And somehow or another that ends up messing up that board. So, again, just something random with this one machine. They weren't all like that. Eric said they had never come across that. But it was a really hard thing to troubleshoot because, the game would still function. When you press the button, it would in essence, unrelease the start button. So it's just a strange thing. Luckily, Travis, was, figuring this out. We thought it had something to do with the ball trough because the game would automatically start too. And so that's kind of how we ended up, identifying that issue.
I thought the funniest unique thing on this machine was that one of the parts, and we didn't change it even, is that the owl is installed where he's not looking at you. He's looking towards the back of the machine. And every other Magic Girl, the owl is pointed out looking at the player. So anyway, we thought that was a funny idiosyncrasy that we didn't change. One of the biggest problems with the game coming to us was it was very challenging to start a game. And I think after having troubleshot this LED issue, where the LEDs would turn off every time we powered off the machine, is that it was such a struggle to start a game because the start button was wired backwards. And so that whole time, I think we could have had more functionality as soon as Tim bought the game if we had just realized that the start button was actually, wired the wrong way around. Because you could kind of start a game, but then it would still behave in a very oddly. So it's really difficult. We had almost no functionality for the machine when it came to us, and that was in no small part due to that start button issue, I think.
Yeah. It was strange though, because the LEDs would work fine. There was no issues at all with the LEDs before we did the upgrade. But then once we upgraded the computer and the software associated with LEDs, that's when we started having that problem. But as far as functionality, the game did shoot. It doesn't have a auto launcher by default, so that's one of the main mechanisms we installed. That adds a bunch of functionality to the game. But really, I think to me the most impressive thing and one of the more difficult things to install was the ball lock. So the game was designed to have ball locks on each of the large plastic habit on the side, but that feature never got fully completed, and so it wasn't implemented. So there's these giant ramps that you shoot up, and it comes down and just returns back to the flipper. But with this kit, we added some locks that have little coils that actuate whenever you light the locks, and that really adds a lot to the game.
Yeah, and you imagine, so you're adding two all new mechanisms to the machine, so that's brand new design mechanisms, all the software associated with making the locks work, making the lights associated with the locks work, making the modes work. So it's a top to bottom modification to the machine, which really completely comprehensive. There was other functionality that they added. They added a whole magnet where there was clearly a space under the playfield where a magnet was intended to be installed, but for whatever reason, and maybe to power reasons or something like that, the American decided not to install that part from the factory. Well, the Dutch team, made that work. So they added the power supplies and the voltage needed, and the mechanism with the mounting bracket and the wiring, all to make this playfield magnet work that didn't exist in the machine before they developed this kit.
It's pretty funny though. There's a recessed part underneath the playfield where this magnet goes, and they just put a little decal that has a little, art on there which no one would see. So it was, really strange that they had some of the features are, but it just wasn't completed. And again, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were just out of money and we're trying to get these machines made into people before things completely imploded.
Yeah, they added a whole spinning saw blade for the lion saw feature, so that requires a motor controller, a motor, and the ingenuity to figure out how to do it. So yeah, there's a number of things like that, and then they just improved the performance across the board. So they actually increased the voltage running to all of the magnets in the machine so that they would have more oomph, and you could actually play the upper play field with its magna flippers. They improved the geometry and the power of the popper to actually shoot the ball up into the upper play field, which is a pretty complex activity. So we were very impressed with just the depth and breadth of all of the aspects of the kit and the improvements.
Yeah, so we worked on this upgrade over the holidays, the Christmas holidays of 2023, and it probably took about 2 weeks to get most of the mechs done and installed. Like Travis said, the videos were pretty helpful on that. But we did come into a lot of issues where there's just difference in geometry where like something wouldn't fit or wouldn't line up correctly. Thankfully, we had a 3D printer that we were able to custom print some parts to kind of act as brackets and hold stuff in place. Specifically those lock mechanisms, it was just a lot of stuff really close together, switches and through holes and coils, and just trying to get all that stuff in a really tight space after the fact. It's definitely a challenge, but luckily we were able to get that working. So
Barrels of Fun donated the tilt bob assembly, so we got that installed. Took that home from the office. One of the really fun details, and I think it just speaks to the depth of the kit that the Dutch team created, was even on the plastics. There's 2 rabbits that sit over the inlanes, and they actually created a new plastic design for those areas that have perforations through the backside of the rabbit so that you can see the lighted inserts below them. In the original game, they were completely invisible because they were hidden behind the art on covering the inlanes. And of course, I guess that bothered them, and they fixed the problem by actually perforating the rabbit's backside, so it still looks good, and you can also see your inserts.
Yeah, so as far as the kit's installed, like we installed everything that was on there. We didn't replace all the plastics, just the ones that had specific things that were different, like some through holes and stuff like that. And another item we did not end up installing was there's a ball diverter at the top of one of the giant ramps that feeds the right ball lock. The mechanism that we had on our machine seemed to work fine. I think in the kit, one of the selling points of their new mechanism was that it was a lower profile, so it was a little bit easier to see the screen. That the diverter that's on there now blocks the screen along with all the other stuff, but it doesn't really impact the functionality of being able to see your score or the stuff on there. So we ended up leaving that on there. That's one of the few things that we didn't change.
Well, I forgot how much you had to cut off at the top of the monitor bracket. You went out with the jigsaw and cut about a half an inch off of that bracket. Because each Magic Girl is a little bit different, and so you could tell that the way that the playfield display was installed was custom. Like the technicians that day installed it however the best they could, and so it wasn't, the parts that we received were a little bit different than what was actually for in our game.
Yeah, so the LCD is in a big steel enclosure. It has some lips on there and stuff, and that ended up interfering with the plastic, so ended up using a Dremel to kind of completely cut that metal off of there. So that was a challenge.
It's not nerve-wracking at all to be cutting into a 1 in 25 nearly priceless pinball machine.
Yeah, as far as the game, you can just look at it and tell it's a Popadiuk game. I mean, the skill shot is very similar to like on World Cup Soccer, where you have 3 little slots that it can fall into. Again, that was another mech that we had to upgrade. The optos that were on there from the factory were not functional, and they could also get hit by the ball because they were sticking out in the way. But as far as like the software and actual rules, to me it seems pretty simple. I haven't spent a ton of time on there, so I don't think the code is super deep. I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the game is very beautiful. All the RGB LEDs throughout the machine. I was really impressed that the actual fit and finish of things, like all of the ramps, operate very smoothly. The shots all feel, good, like right where they should. And I think the game is it doesn't have the full depth of a Bally Williams, Theater of Magic, or Tales of the Arabian Nights, but you could tell it was inspired by all of those games. Some of the aspects that are really great are the music and the call-outs and the sound effects. The animations are beautiful. Of course, the art is they're really the selling point of the game. But yeah, overall gameplay, it's still pinball. It's a great fun machine, but it's not particularly deep. So I think it has a fun enough. Is how I describe it.
And then even after the upgrade too, I mean, the game's not, perfect. There's some mechs, like one that's supposed to be a ball lock where you shoot the ball in there. So I think I call it the levitating mech. The idea was it's supposed to almost like levitate the ball, but even if that did work, it's inside a coil, so you can't really see it. So at most that would happen is the ball would just kind of disappear for 10 seconds while it's being held in there. But the software is smart enough, at least there's a switch that triggers before it goes inside that mech. A little pop-up bumper or a pop-up comes up between the flippers, similar to like another game that has one of those.
Galactic Tank Force?
Yeah, like Galactic Tank Force. So, even though it doesn't always, hold the ball like it's supposed to, sometimes it comes out the top, it's still, you can continue to play it. It doesn't really impact gameplay. So, just little things like that, where it's like, it's a great idea, but in reality, it doesn't work 100% of the time. So you just kind of have to go into that knowing that when you are doing the kit. Working on this was very fun. Like, whenever I saw the kit, before I even talked to Tim, I emailed the team and asked them how much it was going to cost and it was going to be available, and they came back with a laundry list of questions about are we willing to ship the game to them, how much would you pay for this, all kinds of stuff like that. And I didn't necessarily have the answers to it, but then luckily I think probably several months later Tim ended up buying the kit, and as soon as he told me he did that, I told him, I was like, I think this is going to be pretty involved. It might require some engineering, and I'd be happy to work on it. And honestly, one of the big reasons was just to be able to get to play the game and see it and become familiar with it. So
this is big kid Legos too, right? It's like it has an instruction sheet. It's got tons of parts, and so it's sort of an adventure to put it back together.
It's a super fun process. I mean, it was just a little bit nerve-wracking knowing that it's not your game. If you screw something up, there might not be a replacement for it. So we were trying to be super careful with everything, and really didn't have any issues at all. I mean, you had to modify stuff and 3D print stuff, but we never had anything break or anything catastrophic. So we got lucky in that aspect.
Our little box of calm from Titan with all the screws and nuts and random parts that we'd accumulated over time were super helpful too.
Yeah, we did have to use a lot of screws and stuff that were not necessarily in the kit just for making it work on our machine.
But I love pinball machine mods, and this is like the ultimate mod to me. Yes, this was an awesome, fun process for us. We can't thank Tim Hood enough for letting us upgrade his machine and giving us the opportunity to have this experience. And of course, Eric Bartels for all of his support and the awesome work that he did on the kit. The videos were super entertaining as we were learning how to...
The dogs in the background, just like when we were working on our machine.
How to do the upgrades, yeah. Jim Askey he did the software for the development, and he also helped us answering questions, a lot of silly questions about our backward start button, but he's more than willing to help us on all those things. So, yeah.